Hi, Greg here. Today we're looking at Pocket Money Project number 26, the event sequencer. It's a simple little project, and we'll have a look at the run sheet. The run sheet says we're going to have a look at the sequencer itself. We're going to have a look at the departures in my build from standard. We'll have a look at the standard code operation. We'll look at the altered code, and we'll look at some programming issues I came across on the way through. Got a light flickering here. That's better. Okay, the project as I built it is here. The pointer I've got is over here. Sorry, I bumped the camera. Okay, so if we look at this from the point of view of what's normal in this project anyhow, normally this project has 5 outputs here. Output A, B, C, D and E. And then it has a trigger. And I've color-coded the trigger green here. It has a 5-volt regulator on the project, and it has jumpers that you set. Each jumper corresponds to setting a different delay along the sequence here, and we'll have a look at that in just a little bit more in a minute. In terms of differences from mine to the standard project, I've got a polarity protection diode here. I've got a larger cap on the way in. I've used the input cap that came with the project as an output cap, a 330 nanofarad cap, tantalum. I have put a trigger switch on the board so that I can trigger it from here without having to have an external switch or sensor to do the work while I'm playing around with it. In my output section, I also bring out a ground pin. It's not shown too well there, the black. And the red is 5 volts, and the yellow is nominally 12 volts. It's basically 12 volts less a Schottky diode drop over here. Is it standard? It's very close to the. There's a few little fiddles to get the outputs the way I wanted them, including pin 7 down here has to have a pull-up resistor. Well, I'd run out of board to put it out here. It's actually hidden underneath the socket. It runs down the inside of the socket and goes from pin 1 on the pick down to pin 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, sorry. Pin 8. Okay, now the normal way of programming them is you just put a jumper on one of these, you wind the delay around to where you want it, and then you take the jumper off and it programs that delay. You can see here mine's got a power letter on it too. I said we'd have a look at the standard mode of operations, and here's the way the sequence works. So the delay you set with jumper A is how long is it delayed before output A goes low. When you start, all the outputs are high. MERG convention is when an output goes low, that's the on state, and a device will respond to a low as an on. The delay there for B is how long from A going low to B going low, and right through to jumper E controlling how long between output D going low and output E going low. So that's fine. You imagine that there's a light detecting resistor or something going off to say, hey, we've seen a train coming, go and run the sequence, which might be close some crossing gates and set some lights flashing and all the rest of it. And then we get to the other end and everything's moved to where it needs to be. Then you get to, okay, how about a reverse sequence? Well, the reverse sequence is kind of interesting. What's happened is they use the delay from the sequence above, where it was how long to go from D to E. It's actually used as how long from the trigger going off to output E going high. Then we get the next one is output E going high to output D going high. What you'll notice in here is jumper D is controlling a transition between states E and D down here, and jumper D is controlling the states between C and D up here. So I've called this an asymmetric approach because the delay on one way out is not the same as the delay going back. The other things to think about are how this works and why would it be done this way? When obviously, hey, if E is the delay between D and E, why isn't E the delay between D and E down here? The answer is pretty simple. If this was triggered by a light detecting resistor or a laser detector or whatever it was, and the whole sequence runs from one end to the other, regardless of whether that sensor's gone back to its normal state, then you need the complete sequence to finish. Well, the forward sequence finishes when that output goes low. When it gets to there, the trigger is probably in a state, or possibly in a state, that says, we're done, let's do the reverse sequence. Now, so we don't just go A, B, C, D, E, and all of a sudden it goes, oops, I'm triggered already, E, D, C, B, A. The reverse sequence starts off with a delay. Now, there's only 5 jumpers on the board, so if you're going to have a delay at the start of this to make sure that your process at E actually finishes, then this is a way to do it by saying, hey, we'll have a delay from E to from trigger high to E, and that'll give me some time for the whole process to finish. Well, I wasn't totally happy with that approach because imagine that we had a door opens, takes a couple of seconds to open, then it takes 4 seconds for a little man to wander out to a truck. In the reverse process, it's important that the man gets his 4 seconds to go back, and then the door closes with its 2-second delay if we don't do anything tricky to change the speed. If we could change the speed, well, we'd have our man running back into the house, and that's not exactly what you want. You've lost your illusion pretty quickly. So what I did is I decided to change the sequence to augment it. And I'll just grab this piece of paper. And here's the sequence as I revised it to go. I've introduced some extra delays. So jumper A, I left the jumpers do what they did in the original case for the forward sequence. So that's all normal. But at the end I've added an extra one, and that's how long after output E goes low should we end the forward sequence. So that means that regardless of what's happened with the trigger after the initial triggering, we're going to finish. We're going to run that last delay, and it's going to allow time for whatever that motion E is, whether it's just a light or whether it's a guy moving or whether it's a crane swinging around. It's got time to finish its motion, and our automation may actually be it moves out there, it sits there for a while, and then it's done. And the reverse sequence would then bring everything back. So it's important we give it time at the end to complete its operation. Now, the reverse sequence, so that we can be symmetric, we need to use the jumpers between the states the same as they were. So here I've added a couple of extra delays. In the original forward process and the revised one, jumper A is how long from the trigger going low to A going low. That's not important. It's a delay for when does the sequence really start. It's not important when we're going in reverse. So let's just go back a bit and start at the top of this process. There was a delay in the forward sequence. How long after the trigger goes off should I take output A low? To give a similar capability, what I've done is I've said, right, I'll allow there to be another delay for how long after the trigger goes high do I take output E high. Whether people use it or not, I don't really care, but what it does is it gives you a capability there to do that. And it's a bit similar to the way the old code used to work. You could set that to be the same as E, jumper E's setting in the past, and it would work, but it still wouldn't be great. It would be symmetrical now, which would be good. And down the other end, I've said, okay, we really want output A to finish its operation as well. If the trigger's gone off again, as A starts to move, well, we really want A to finish going back to where he started. So there's that extra delay. And I've added some ways to set these jumpers, set these delays. So as I said before, normally you put one jumper on and then take it off and it sets things. What I've had to do is augment that programming process. So to get output E to low, transition to N forward, this one here. To get that to happen, I put jumper B on. While B is on, then I put E on. Then I take B off, then I take E off, and the delay will be set. In fact, the code works in a way that it doesn't care which order you take them off. It waits till they're all off before it proceeds. So the way you start the process is important. You put jumper B on, and then you put jumper E on. To set the other ones, C plus E for trigger off to output E high. That's the start of the reverse process. And A on, and add jumper E to get the output A high to the end of the reverse sequence. The order may look a little bit odd as to why is it A here and C here and blah blah blah, but if you look at it again, you'll see that this is, if you think about jumper A is controlling the very first output. So if I make the augmented process for setting this output delay be the end of the reverse, it's sort of logical. Hey, I want another delay out past where A is, out towards that end. So that makes sense for that to be A. That's reverse. So then the next one, hey, what about going the other way? So basically it's the forward, it's the reverse delay, then the forward delay, and then how long for this delay from the trigger to output E going high. A lot of words there, but now I think we should see what's going on. So a little bit more to show. I did some other things. I've got some default delays in this code, and at power up it honours the two jumpers as well. If jumper A is on, it'll set the default delays. So don't care what delays you had, they're going to get overwritten with defaults. It's something I like because quite often people get stuff, they change things around, they get in a mess and they can't get back to where they started. Then B is set a diagnostic flag that's used in the code, and the only thing the diagnostic flag's used for in the code is to turn the outputs all on and off a couple of times if it reinitializes the delays. So a couple of other things, a bit like the traffic lights. I've got a little board here with some LEDs and another switch for a trigger. It just sits on the end of my board here. Okay, it's one short, so there's a pin still there, but I don't need it. All I need is the LEDs are running from the output of the LED being high to ground, so it will show a LED when the output is high, and then the LED will be out when the output is low. I'll give it some go juice, and all the LEDs are on. If I hit the button here, away she goes forward. I'll show you what the defaults are in just a moment. Okay, so the defaults. A third sheet here that wants to stick to the second one. Okay. What I did is I said, okay, There's the forward sequence, and you can see that the trigger, once the trigger goes off, output A immediately goes, and at the other end I wait 2.5 seconds for output E to finish doing what it's got to do. The other one, the third one, how long for the reverse sequence, it's down there, and it says, the second and third one, sorry. At the end of the reverse sequence there's 2.5 seconds delay, which mirrors the end of the forward sequence, and the top of the sequence is mirrored in the forward one where there's no delay after the trigger goes off before the output E goes high. So they're the defaults. All the transitions between states are 1.5 seconds, and that's going to be approximate. The timers are actually counting milliseconds, and I'm not sure how accurate it is at that. I haven't sat down and checked out whether the delays are getting to the maximum minimum as the code was originally designed to do. The idea was that the pot would, which gives a reading of 255 down to 0, as you wind it around, excuse me, it is meant to give you a delay between 10 seconds and no seconds. So if we just have a look at this sequence again and say which jumper does what, if we look at the transition from, let's say the transition from B low to C low, that's controlled by jumper C. So if I put jumper C on the board here, down here, then I'll wind this pot around a little bit, and going in that direction makes it longer. Sorry about the big hairy arm in the middle. And now I take this off. That delay is now set. So now let's see what happens to our sequence. Now we've got a big long wait, and the others are normal. So it's that easy to set a delay. Now, if you wanted your delays to be the same value, then you can just put the jumpers on and off, and that'll set them all to the value that's on the pot. The other thing I can do is I can show you what happens with the trigger response. So if I hold the trigger on, I said before that when output E goes low, it waits 2.5 seconds before it declares the process finished. That trigger is still on. Now, we know the defaults say that the delay from trigger going off to E going high is 0. So if I let it go, bang, there it goes. And you can see the symmetry in the process where that we've got a longer delay in the middle. What else can I do? I might change the delay before the reverse sequence starts. So that's jumper A goes on and jumper E goes on. And I'm going to leave that delay the same as what we had for the other transition we changed. Now I just take these two off, and I'll hit the trigger again, and away she'll go. Now 2.5 seconds for that last output to end the sequence. Now if I let it go, it came straight back. I've done something silly. A plus E. I changed end reverse sequence. I wanted C plus E. Okay, so let's see. I said I changed A plus E. So what that means is how long does it wait after it does a reverse sequence before it honors the trigger again. So I'll let it run all the way forward and all the way back. This time I'm going to hit the trigger. And what we're going to get is a delay before it comes back. So there we go. Okay, so let's set the one I meant to set. Jumper C goes on. It doesn't read these jumpers until it's at its wait state, like that. Okay, so C is on, E is on. Now we'll just check that. C plus E, how long from when the trigger goes high to when output E goes high? And I'll give it a little bit longer delay again. Okay, here we go. Again, we've got that delay at the start that I just introduced. Hello. Guess what? What you can see is some idiot didn't take the jumpers off. So some idiot takes the jumpers off. Now we might have a chance. Okay. Now, how long before that white light goes on after I let it go? It's going to be a few seconds. Okay, so you can see the setting operation is pretty straightforward. Yes, you've got to remember which ones, and yes, you have to take the jumpers off at the end of it or it's not going to set anything. But that's how she goes. Now, I'm going to put jumpers, I'll drop the power first. Okay, so it's dead as. The lights aren't on and nobody's home. I'm going to put two jumpers on. Jumper A at power up will reinitialize the defaults, reinitialize the delays to the default values. Jumper B sets a diagnostic flag. Now, the diagnostic flag, the only thing the code's using it for at the moment is if it reinitializes the array because it found either bad values in the delay variables in memory or it was told to by the presence of jumper A on the way at startup, then it'll flash the LEDs. So let's give it some go juice. Now guess whose board's just set itself back to defaults. Jumper's off, I remembered this time. Hit the button and we're back at our 1.5 second delay between each of the states. So I think there's a few improvements there above the initial project. Again, you can't make improvements to projects unless someone's done the spade work for you. But that's how it works. And on the run sheet I said I would talk a little bit about programming issues that I had with the code. There's a couple of things. These pics don't have much memory, and I just set forward and wrote procedures with a whole pile of parameters here and there to do what I wanted, and quickly ran out of stack space in the processor, and the compiler gave me dreaded out of memory errors. So there was a fair bit of fooling around figuring out just what's going on with how to preserve stack space, how to preserve memory space, what things affected the use of stack space, and how to get it to go. So there'll probably be a MERG journal article about that at some stage. There's probably a lot of guys who've been there, done that. For me, I came across it, and hopefully I can save someone else from going there as well. I said I hid a resistor in this. I'll dig it out. I'll dig the pick out. Just get this knife in there. Okay, down inside there, you can see where I've hidden a resistor. Not that I meant to hide it. I had to get a resistor from the top left-hand pin to the bottom right-hand pin, and there's no track that goes straight through to do it. So, yeah, I picked up the adjacent hole to that pin 1 on the processor right here. And so there's another hole there. Put the resistor into that hole and ran it down to the adjacent hole here. Down under there, the hole behind there. The other little fiddle that I did around this place is I used that same hole and I jammed a 100 nanofarad cap into that hole and the adjacent one. I put the cut between the tracks, and that gives me my decoupling capacitor for the chip. So yeah, it's been an interesting project. You would think that just changing a sequence to be symmetric would be a simple little process, but quickly you realise that you're short of some delays to make it resilient across guaranteeing that processes can finish before they start again. That's it. I'm sorry this has been a bit rough with lighting too, but hopefully it's pretty clear. It's still test code right now. I've been sending Davey some emails and Fraser some emails about what's going on. I think it's an improvement. I'll post a video and let people know it's there. Then I've got to get on and start writing some journal articles about some of these things. The programming sequence I introduced for doing the extra delays, I actually was using the trigger initially to give me the way to set them, and that would give me 5 extra things I could set. It occurred to me that using the trigger wasn't the best for the average user out there, because if they were trying to adjust a delay on a board that's wired into their layout, then how do they invoke the trigger when all they've got in front of them is the jumpers? So I changed the code around so that it would make use of jumper 5 as well as the other jumpers to do the work. That means I've got one spare delay, but I can't think of anything useful to use it for. There's also another 3 different things that I could set at startup time. And a couple of things have occurred to me. One is that I could have different default values for people. So the ones I've got right now is one set of defaults. So I could say, righto, if jumper A is on there, then you get the defaults as they are here. I could say if jumper B is on, that you're going to get a different set, and so on. I'd just make the diagnostic jumper probably move down to E, so that didn't matter what I did with the others, the diagnostic one was always in the same place. That's it, guys. Bit long, but a lot of fiddling in terms of how, what am I doing and why and how. I hope it's been useful. The thing that I'm also hoping people realise is the pocket money kits are great. They do things right now for you, but you can make them do what you want to, often without a lot of mucking around. This one was a little bit different in that I ran into some troubles with the compiler, and I was trying to make some reasonably significant change. In terms of programming, just a trap for young players. What I found was the delay routines in the delay library that come with JAL, the compiler that's used for this. If you use one of the delay routines, you'll lose about 6 stack locations. Might have been 3, I can't remember. It's one of those 2. There's a reason why you might remember multiples. But then if you use a different one, you lose the same amount again, because none of those routines in that library share the same locations, and they all require temporary space to do their work and have a parameter comes in. So each of the different delays you use causes you to lose stack space quickly. I said before that I implemented the delays in milliseconds, and that could cause me some inaccuracy in the timings right now. So what I mean by that is a delay of 2,000 milliseconds actually going to using the millisecond timer, actually going to be close to what I would get out of the delay, calling delay 1 second with a parameter of 2. I don't know the answer, and for a project like this, is it close enough? And the answer is probably yes. What matters is the delays are what you set them to. It doesn't matter that a 2 second, if I call a delay procedure saying I want 2000 milliseconds, that I actually get 2000 milliseconds. It matters that I got the time that you actually wanted it to go. I'll do some testing on this. I'll make sure that at full winding of the pot that I am getting a 10-second delay, which was the original spec for this project. It's easy to change because instead of dividing by 255 somewhere in the code, I would divide by a different integer to get the range that I need to get back out to 10 seconds. It would change the comparison I use to see if the values in memory are actually within range. I don't know that I said that. If you start the code up and there's invalid data in the EEPROM locations, it will initialize the variables at that point in time as well. So it's important that whatever I let the range of the pot deliver in terms of reading, that the checks on the EEPROM allow the same range. That's it. I really think that's it this time. I know there's probably been about 2 or 3 goes at that's it, but I reckon we're there. So, Pocket Money Kit 26. Yeah, I think it's going to be found to be more useful in this mode. There's plenty out there using it now, but yeah, I think this is a little bit better. Okay, thanks guys. Bye.